Hey guys, my name is Ryan and welcome to Overwatch Central. So, it's been fairly quiet when it comes to Overwatch news at the moment, but there was something that I realised. There's actually a patch on the PTR currently that's been on there for quite some time that everybody's forgotten about. This is a PTR patch that came through on August the 22nd, which was 25 days ago, just over 3 weeks. The reason why I mention it is because it looks like it's going to be hitting the live servers tomorrow. It was a couple of people on Twitter that brought it up, namely EVA, that said that there was a background update. I didn't notice it myself, but then it clicked that the PTR changes that are currently on there now didn't actually go through to live and we're still waiting for them. What are those changes? Well, we can quickly go through them now and then talk about their impact on the game, as I imagine there's going to be some at least. The first change is to Bastion self-repair. It no longer consumes resources when you're at full health, and Bastion now correctly initiates 0.25 seconds of recovery time when cancelling self-repair with weapon fire. I saw Colorblind mention that she thought this was a nerf and it was going to be sort of aiming at the healing in between shots when you're in tank mode. Being a thing seems to be something specifically tagged in that, but we also have changes to Symmetra. The primary fire beam, the width of it has been lowered to 0.15 meters, so it's had its width halved, and the damage scaling has been reduced. The first tier, it's 60 damage instead of 65. The second tier is 120 damage instead of 130, and then finally the highest DPS tier is now 180 DPS instead of it being 195. Zarya also had a nerf, with the beam width being reduced to 0.15 instead of it scaling to 0.2, so it doesn't get bigger as you fire, and also the max beam DPS has been lowered to 170 instead of 190. These are very weird nerfs, but we'll talk about what they are in a second and what exactly they're aiming to do with them. Then Sigma also got nerfed. The explosive damage from his primary fire was reduced to 30, experimental barrier now has a toggle option in case you want it, accretion has had its damage increased by 10, and gravitic flux has a bigger cast time from 0.4 seconds to 0.6. This along with a couple of workshop changes to create dummy bots and the like. Other than that though, it's fairly standard stuff. Like, none of the bug fixes are big nerfs or changes in any meaningful way. So we've had quite a lot to break down there, but let's talk about Symmetra Zarya, as I feel that them being nerfed is the most important and also the most confusing thing that's in this patch. But this is something that Josh No actually brought up last week when he was talking about hero balancing and the like. We highlighted that in the video, but at the end of it he does mention these changes. Aside from meta considerations, it's important to prioritize individual hero balancing, which is why we're tuning Zarya and Symmetra's damage output. The recent beam bug fix was far more potent than expected, with those heroes on average seeing a 20 to 40% increase in their damage. Their original damage values were tuned without knowledge of this bug. So that's just a brief explanation into why they feel the need to nerf Zarya and Symmetra at the moment. They were talking about a lot of changes in that balance. Fred talking about reverting changes because GOAT is no longer a thing, but they are still focusing on individual hero balance. Even though Zarya isn't particularly meta right now, she's still gonna get a nerf, just because that's stuff that they need to think about. We have Bastion nerfs that we've highlighted, Sigma nerfs, which I think are quite impactful. I think Sigma's kit as a whole is incredibly strong, much like Orisa, so it's a start, reducing some of the elements of his kit, increasing the damage of accretion, which might incentivize people to use it more as a damage tool, but his ultimate had a little nerf, his damage output had a little nerf, and a quality of life fix for the experimental barrier. I think more is needed, but to be honest, I think that's more aimed at Orisa than Sigma. I think Sigma's balance is okay. It's not amazing, it's not great, but it's not bad. It doesn't require much fixing, not as much as Orisa in my personal opinion at least. Bastion change is pretty small, I feel, just a sort of thing to add in there, but I think the main thing about this change and why it's so weird is because it's been on there for 25 days. At most, PTR patches are on there for like 2 to 3 weeks, and it's not as if these changes themselves are so impactful that Blizzard want to hold off putting them on because there's going to be a big meta shift or anything like that. These are small changes that are more quality of life as a whole, as opposed to changing the meta in any meaningful way. I believe the reason why it's been on the PTR for so long, it must be to do with the Overwatch League. It would make sense a couple of days after the semi-finals before the grand finals, they wanted to put this change in, probably to do with the amount of time before the patch would go into live versus when it'd go into the grand finals. Maybe they left this patch a bit longer just so it wouldn't be in the grand finals, if that makes sense. So it might be to do with the rules there between live patches and the Overwatch League ones, just to make sure that the teams that were in the grand final wouldn't have to deal with these nerfs to particular heroes, and they're playing on the same patch that they have been over the past couple of weeks. That would be my guess, but it's still a bit odd. Blizzard don't tend to wait this long with changes, unless it's something like role queue or a new hero that might be a bit broken. More often than not, they can get these changes out in a couple of weeks, so that would be my guess. It's not a huge patch by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a start. I would assume that after the grand finals, we might start seeing consistent patches again, now that Blizzard don't need to worry about the pro scene. That's my hope, at least. We might start getting into a pretty exciting meta. Now that role queue's been in the game, we can start moving forward with the balance there. But let me know what you think of this patch, if you're excited or not. Take care. We'll see you very soon.